Thanks, Deborah. Actually, one second here. Just going to take the liberty of muting everybody. And I'm going to keep you on mute through the duration of the presentation, just to keep things moving. Let me share my screen again. So thanks again, Deborah, and welcome everybody to our latest session of Virtual BusinessWise Insiders. As I said, since we have so many people here, I'm just going to keep everybody on mute while I walk through today's presentation. And even though we've been virtual for almost a year now, the idea behind Insiders is still to ensure that everybody can meet and learn from each other. So at the end of the presentation, we'll split into breakout rooms, as Deborah mentioned, where you'll have a chance to introduce yourself and ask questions and share your own insights on anything related to a year of remote prospecting or some of the lessons we walk through during today's presentation. And as always, if you do have a question, you can either write it down or feel free to ask in the chat window. And then during the breakout session, we'll try and discuss as many of those as possible. And again, since we've been virtual for almost a full calendar year, we thought we'd revisit a topic from early on in our virtual insiders. And it's a topic that's only grown in importance over the past year. And that's how to use email as a prospecting tool to generate leads and appointments. But we're taking a slightly different angle this time around, specifically to take a look at a few key lessons we've learned from a year of email prospecting on behalf of ourselves and our clients. What's different, what's grown in importance, and the best way to craft successful email campaigns. And email has always obviously been a powerful way to connect with new and good prospects. And last year we started by taking a look at the two general mindsets that sales reps usually have about email. And unfortunately, a lot of sales reps have ignored email as a way to reach prospects because they think it's only for marketers or that it just doesn't work very well. And the reps who do use email often waste time sending messages their prospects don't care about and don't reply to. So you have the sales rep on the left who's not even trying, which is the only sure recipe for failure, and then the sales rep on the right doesn't know where to start. And that's maybe one of the big overarching shifts that we've seen over the past year, and that's an acceleration of the move from the mindset on the left to the mindset on the right. We've seen a lot more sales reps be ready to embrace email as an effective prospecting tool. And so the question then becomes, what do I write? And if that's the logical next question, we want to make sure to emphasize that it's important to take a step back from some of those details. You know, with email prospecting, it's easy to get lost in the details of specific words, sentences, and paragraphs. And it's really critical to stay focused on the big picture, especially as it relates to what's changed over the course of the past year and what's important in getting a prospect to respond. And in our experience, the key to using email to successfully generate good leads, responses, first-time appointments comes down to answering these three questions. How can sales reps craft emails that make their prospects read them, care about them, and act on them in the form of a callback or a reply? And we're seeking to answer these questions in a shifting environment, one where a lot is new and different about the way people conduct business, but also one where many of the fundamental principles of why people act remain the same. So as we continue through the presentation, I just wanted everybody to be thinking about three big changes that have taken place over the past year as we've seen them. And the first one is that human interaction for a lot of sales reps is now remote by default. Remote interaction certainly isn't anything new, but for many in sales, it's now really the only game in town, which has positive consequences and negative ones. And maybe one of the most important positive consequences as far as prospecting goes is that the perceived barrier to meeting with somebody who's reached out to you for an appointment is a little bit lower. You know, there are no more long drives to an appointment. All you have to do is launch Zoom or your favorite video conferencing software and you're face-to-face with a prospect. But the flip side of that is the inbox is a lot more crowded. More people are using email for remote prospecting, but also internally email is dominating the way teams interact with each other. So it's harder and more important to find ways to stand out in the inbox and differentiate yourself from the competition. And before I get into the specific details of the lessons we've learned, I just want to invite Deborah to offer any thoughts she might have at this point.
I just want to mention that we're talking about email and its importance, which is really great. We want to remember that this isn't the only method to reach out, and certainly the phone is still important. And one of the downsides of email is that the fact of the matter is it doesn't feel as bad to get rejected about an unopened or unread email as it does with a phone call. The fact of the matter is that they're both important. And even though we're focusing on email today, I don't want anybody to think that we want everybody to forget about the phone and just do email, because it's not a workable option.
And that's a good point, because I think when you're interacting remotely, sometimes you think of email as the only or primary way of interacting with each other, when the phone has always been the most predominant way of remote interaction. And it's certainly something that should be used strategically in combination with email prospecting. Let's get into the first lesson. And that's the idea that you need to offer something in your email. Whether you call it a contract or a transaction or a two-way street, it's really important not to think of email as telling and selling. That is the idea that as soon as you tell your prospect about your great product or service, that you'll be able to sell it to them, because your prospect won't care about or respond to your email if she doesn't see any value in doing so. So you have the marketer or the prospector on the right saying, if I offer her that something that benefits her, the prospect will have a reason to reply, call, or click. And many of you may have heard about the 40-40-20 rule, something that we talk about a lot here at BusinessWise in relation to all aspects of lead generation and sales, but it helps us stay focused on the big picture. It's the idea that the vast majority of lead gen success comes from two basic concepts: your list, targeting the right people, and your offer, and that's the value you're offering in your interaction with your prospects. And our goal at BusinessWise is to help our clients with all three pieces. We want our clients to start off working from a focused list of high-value prospects, which we provide with our locally researched contact database. We also work with clients to ensure they're delivering value to their prospects by crafting compelling offers and presenting them in a way that the prospects will respond to. And the reason this is so important with email prospecting is that, again, it's so easy to get lost in the land of this 20%, the subject lines and the words and the images, when it's really much more important to offer something your prospects care about. And while email offers, especially when you're talking about marketing, can come in many shapes and sizes, in most direct email prospecting, your offer is going to be you, your own ideas, a meeting, a phone call, or a conversation with you. And it's really important, even if you're talking about what you can provide to your prospect, to frame it in terms of how your prospect stands to benefit, to explain the value that they receive. And your offer becomes a lot more compelling when it's different. Your email stands out more when your prospect perceives your offer as unique. So think about what or how do you deliver that sets you apart from your competition. And then another critical piece, especially when it comes to setting those first appointments, is that the offer needs to come with no strings attached. What does your prospect get from a meeting with you, even if they never become a client? Because if they see that and perceive that clearly, that value, and know that it doesn't necessarily mean that they're obligated to give you anything in return, then they're much more likely to say yes because they have nothing to lose. Deborah, did you want to add anything here?
So we've certainly talked in other sessions about Robert Cialdini's persuasion principles. And these are great examples of, we talked about scarcity before, reciprocity, and giving something of value. And it doesn't, and generally it's ideas and information and trends that your prospects really want. And those things aren't about your product necessarily. They can be related in the same ballpark as the kinds of things your product offers. But I can't think of any more valuable sales meeting to have than to think about offers you can make and ideas and trends and insights that your prospects would find valuable. So think about that for your next sales meetings.
And again, in the context of the past year, the offer is going to be the number one thing that differentiates you from your competition when it comes to email prospecting. But moving on to the next lesson, we talked about the importance of offering that value, but then it's also important to differentiate yourself in how you communicate that value. And that really boils down to two key concepts that have become even more important over the past year of remote prospecting and more crowded inboxes. And the first is that it's really critical in your emails to get to the point quickly. And that's because your prospect is busy fielding emails from all sorts of different people, other sales reps, other colleagues, and there's a sort of attention clock that's always ticking in their mind. So if you take too long to tell your prospects what you want or make them work hard to figure it out on their own, that clock will expire and you'll lose them. So obviously the slide here is illustrating that point, and the prospect is saying, I'm busy, I get hundreds of emails every day, I don't have time to figure out what you want, so just tell me. And another way to think about it is your prospect is either in one of two modes: the info gathering mode, where they're sort of reading your email and trying to figure out what you're saying and what you want, and that's sort of slow, passive, and frustrating, sort of a what's this about mindset. Or they're in an action mode where you've put something to them and they're deciding whether or not to accept it. And it's a more active, decisive, do I act or not mode. And you want to get them to that second mode as quickly as possible. And we found that emails get a lot more responses when right out of the gate, you say something, you tell your prospects what you want in those first 2 or 3 sentences. And 3 sort of common phrases we use to in the first couple sentences are, I'm writing to ask you, I'd like to connect about, do you have 15 minutes for? And it all depends on sort of the tone you want to set, which phrasing you choose. But the idea is to get to that, this is what I'm asking you for, in order to elicit a response and encourage them to feel like they need to act in response to what you've asked for. And the key points here are the prospects aren't naive. They know you want something. And so just coming out and asking is almost more professional and respectful. The clearer and more concise the question, the more likely you'll get a response, because it's obvious to the prospect what you're asking for. And then using certain types of words can highlight the need for a solution and encourage action. And those types of pain words might be frustrated, annoyed, anxious, concerned, worried. But all these strategies are ways to get to the point and encourage your prospect to reply, which is obviously the most important priority of the email prospecting tool. Deb, anything you want to add here?
Go ahead.
Okay. So rolling from that, the next big lesson in how you communicate your offer and what's important in this age of remote prospecting and increased email prospecting is to be real and be personable. And we've seen this as a critical differentiator in a lot of our email prospecting on behalf of clients. The idea here is that your prospect is a human being and you are too, so you should write like it. Marketing speak about your product is boring and irrelevant. Prospects want to hear from real people on the other side, because so often they feel like they're being talked to by a robot or an automated system. And what they want is for that real person to help them solve a problem or address a priority. So I'm going to just show you an example of 2 emails here. This is a real example of an email from a HubSpot blog post. And you can see it's pretty jargony. I work for a company and we specialize in speeding up websites through a technique we call front-end optimization. We've analyzed blah, 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 2-second load time, SEO. We found that we could reduce your load time from 5.1 seconds to 2.9 seconds. And then at the very end, would you like to book a 20-minute phone call? It does not sound like it comes from a warm, fuzzy human being. And just an example of how you could rewrite an email, even like that, to sound a little bit more personal. I'm the CEO of a company, Atlanta-based technology company. Do you have time for a 20-minute phone call this week or next to talk about your website? So again, starting off with a request. I've taken the liberty of running a quick test. It turns out your site loads quite a bit slower than what most users expect these days. Might seem odd that a few seconds could cost you leads, but research shows that slow load times reduce website traffic by up to 50%. And I won't read through the whole thing, but hopefully you can already tell that it sounds a lot more like an actual human on the other side, which is going to increase your chances of getting a response. People feel much more obligated to respond when they feel like there's somebody else on the other side who's reached out directly to them about a problem or priority. And again, the key points here are way too often sales reps who are perfectly capable verbal communicators write emails that sound nothing like what they would say if they were speaking to their prospect. Emails are conversations too, and you should treat them that way. So talk to your prospect as if they were sitting there in front of you rather than some faraway abstraction that you're shouting at from afar. And then a final tip for making your prospect feel like they're part of a direct human-to-human conversation is to reply promptly to any responses you get, even when the response is negative. It shows there's a human on the other end and gives you a chance to really get personal by addressing any specific comments your prospect makes or referring to their firm and its unique circumstances. In a lot of the email campaigns that we run on behalf of clients, we obviously get a fair share of "I'm not interested," or even some people who are turned off by being approached with a cold email. And as soon as you respond with the human touch, it reinforces the idea that there's a human on the other side, and it actually can turn the conversation into something productive that even the prospect didn't expect it to go there and lead to a relationship and an appointment. Anything from you, Deb?
I just want to let our listeners know that the tone and making this personal and individual is really important. And I have to, a tip of the hat to Sam, who is our main writer of our own emails, as well as those of our clients. And the conversations that he has to get to know the client and what's important to them, he does an amazing job of translating not only their products and services ideas, but the tone that that client wants to set. And it's a real gift.
Well, it's an important point too, in terms of distinguishing between email marketing, where you're used to getting an email from a store maybe you bought something from, and it sounds, you're comfortable and familiar with that sort of marketing tone. But when it comes to email prospecting, so many sales reps are so much more comfortable talking like themselves to a company or prospects, and it's actually really shifted the way that I think a lot of people think about email. And like I said, the personal tone has generated great results for us and our clients. So moving on to our fourth lesson, this is a little bit different, and it's something new from last year, but obviously it's near to our heart at BusinessWise since we started in 1980, and that's that local still matters. This is the basis of everything we do for our clients in our three markets, helping them prospect locally to their best local prospects, and it's the foundation of BusinessWise Insiders, which is why we've tried to keep it as personal and collegial as possible, even in a virtual environment. So what does that mean? With so many people working remotely, the concept of local can be overlooked, but it still really matters. Here you have the prospect saying, I can meet with anyone anywhere without leaving my desk, but something's missing. And the key points here are that even though a lot of local businesses conducted in a technically remote way, the idea that you're communicating with somebody who's part of your community can almost be a substitute for that human contact we're all missing. And maybe even more important, because the events of the past year have made geography less important in many ways. The ability to say that you sell locally and that you're familiar with the needs and circumstances of your local business community can serve as another key differentiator. People are getting prospecting emails from firms all over the country, but when you get one from your own backyard in Atlanta or Dallas, Fort Worth, or Charlotte, it feels like something that you maybe want to respond to more because it's part of your community and they are much more likely to know what your needs and circumstances might be. Deb, anything from you before I move on to the final point?
You're good, Sam.
Okay. Thanks. And so now that we've covered how to think about writing emails that are likely to generate responses from prospects, I wanted to turn to sort of a mechanism for doing that. And this is actually the same place we ended up in last year. And I think it's where we want to be now, even more so. And that's that, in addition to focusing on emailing your prospects, offering value, putting yourself in your prospect's shoes, being clear and direct, there's a really powerful way of doing that through email automation. The tips in this presentation work for both one-at-a-time emails to your prospects and automated email prospecting campaigns. And both approaches have their advantages and disadvantages. So on the left, the one-at-a-time can be highly targeted and personalized. You can write to a specific prospect and maybe even reinforce that idea that you're a human on the other side, writing specifically to address their needs and priorities. But the downside is it's really time consuming to write individual emails to every one of your prospects. It's inefficient. And while the leads might be higher in quality, they're lower in volume. Whereas on the right, automated campaigns, they're sequenced emails, 2 or 3 or 4 emails sent to your prospects over time. They generate a steady stream of replies and leads. They require little time or effort to administer because the system's sending them automated and gradually. The downside is they're slightly less personalized. So, shifting gears from what I just spoke about a few minutes ago, there's this sort of balance between writing personal emails and being efficient in your email prospecting, and the idea of threading the needle and being able to do both is really where the sweet spot is. And just quickly, as our clients know, BusinessWise makes it easy to send one-at-a-time emails to decision makers, and anybody who's a client, I would strongly encourage you to take advantage of that feature using some of the tips we've talked about today, especially, as Deborah mentioned out to the presentation, in conjunction with cold calling, for example, to follow up with a voice message you sent. But when it comes to harnessing the real lead gen potential of email, automated email campaigns can be especially powerful and successful. Again, a lot more efficient and less labor intensive than typing out one individual one-at-a-time emails. And again, unlike traditional blast email lead generation where you send your message to your entire list at the same time, automated email sends a sequence of messages over time, generating a steady stream of responses. And it's a strategy that's worked really well for some of our clients who'd never found success with email before because they didn't have time to spend writing and sending emails to prospects every day, and who were sort of down and negative on typical email marketing and wanted to use email as a prospecting tool. And that sequence, that follow-up sequence, can really jar loose some responses that you might otherwise get from a blast campaign. So with that, I guess I'll offer Deborah the opportunity to make any final comments before we go into the breakout rooms.
Sure. The other thing I just wanted to mention about the automated email prospecting versus the blast, and clearly there are reasons sometimes to do a blast. If you're having an event, you can't send something out over time or people will miss the event. At the same time, if your goal is to set an appointment for a phone call or a meeting, doing a one-at-a-time email is great, but nobody can send that many. So with automated email prospecting, you are sending one-at-a-time emails from your own email, and your open rates are going to be much better than if you're sending from another engine and blasting. So make sure that you've considered that, because it is a wonderful addition to actually having to send one-at-a-time emails, which are great and can be extraordinarily personalized, but we all know how long it takes to actually do that to hundreds or thousands of prospects.
Right, and I guess the final point about this, especially as it relates to email being one tool in your prospecting arsenal, is that automated email can can free your time up to do more cold calling to your higher value prospects, letting the automated campaign take that next tranche of prospects, warm them up, and present you with responses that you can then use to engage either via email or cold call. So I'm going to stop the screen share. And in a minute, we're just going to split up into our breakout sessions. We'll have a couple of our own biz dev experts from each of our 3 markets in the rooms to help lead the discussion and answer any questions. And you'll be able to unmute yourself as soon as you enter the room. But if you just wait a moment to let our wise guys introduce themselves, that would be great. And